Good afternoon. Welcome to this hybrid press conference. We have the great honor and the great pleasure to have with us again Mr. Martin Griffiths, that all of you have already met in his various capacities, particularly when he was Special Envoy on Yemen. Now, as you know, Mr. Griffiths is our Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Issues, for Humanitarian Affairs, and Emergency Relief Coordinator. And he is coming back from a mission to Ethiopia, and he would like to give you some introductory remarks about his mission, and then we will take a few questions. Please remember when you ask your questions to introduce yourself, and just for the housekeeping, we only have a half an hour, so let's start immediately. Mr. Griffiths.
Thanks very much. Red button.
That's right.
Obviously, yes. That's it. Now I'll start all over again. Yeah, okay. So thanks very much, Alessandra. Thank you all for being here and online. I'm very glad to have my first major press conference here in Geneva. This is a town which is close to my heart, and I hope to spend a great deal more time here in the future, even though I will, of course, be based in New York. So it's good to meet you again, and I know we've met, all of us, in the past on Yemen. I've been in the job about 2 weeks now as the Emergency Relief Coordinator. I have some background in this because I was in OCHA at the time of its birth, back when Sergio Vera de Mello was the first Emergency Relief Coordinator. I was his deputy, so it's something of a homecoming. It was very important for me to go very quickly to Ethiopia, and I want to obviously focus on that this morning. I've just come back yesterday, the day before yesterday. We spent about 6 days in Ethiopia, in Addis and in Tigray. We had meetings with senior government leaders, including the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, who is also Foreign Minister, the Minister of Peace, and other officials. And it was important to meet them on arrival, and then when we came back from Tigray, because I wanted to make sure that we mutually understood the level of the problem that together we have to deal with in terms of delivering on the humanitarian program. And I want to give some details of that. So we had very constructive meetings. They, of course, told me that they were very keen to help on the difficult issue of delivery of assistance and on protection of civilians. I went to Tigray on a UN flight. We'd spent 2 days in the field, going around talking to IDPs, talking to women, talking to local teachers, health workers, looking at the looted and destroyed infrastructure that exists in Tigray, and the predicament and the tragedy of so many of the people that we met. My main conclusion from that was that the needs, which you will all have heard of, are by no means understated. By no means. These are real needs. The humanitarian system needs 100 trucks a day going into Tigray to meet the needs of the people. It is a phenomenal program in terms of size. And that is 100 trucks a day going in across the line into Tigray, where the Tigrayan authorities have remit. So that's the challenge, is making that pipeline work. At the moment, and during the period of my visit, and up until today, we have just seen 178 trucks which were stuck in Afar, the neighboring region, waiting to go in, have crossed and have reached Mekelle in the last few days, not all at once, in the last few days. And I gather there's about another 40 waiting to get to their destination. But that is very good news for the agencies and the people of Tigray. But of course, it's 100 trucks a day is the target. 100 trucks every single day. My colleague, Ramiro Lopez da Silva, an exceptionally experienced, perhaps the most experienced United Nations official working as the World Food Programme envoy, experienced official on logistics and delivery, is there in Addis now. We overlapped, looking into how to make this work. Now, I had a lot of discussions, of course, with the local administrators in Tigray about what they need. And they need food, the harvest, which is recently being planted, is likely only to produce between a quarter and maximum a half of its likely production. So the need for food is going to go right through until next year. This is no small effort. They need a re-equipment of primary health centers. We saw hospitals and health centers destroyed, the equipment taken away. There are health workers, but there's no salaries. The WHO and UNICEF are working on how to re-equip at a basic level these centers, and much of the equipment coming in on these trucks that I mentioned will go to begin those needs. But we have a vaccination program for measles for the kids of Tigray, which is going to need to take place in 3 weeks. Nothing stops, and the equipment needs to be there. Vaccines, cold chain, and so on and so on. And just a word on protection. As one very, very experienced humanitarian worker for the United Nations said to us in Tigray, she said, this is a protection crisis. And we talked to many of the women who'd suffered terrible, terrible abuse and terrible treatment during the period of the recent months. We talked to, I spoke at some length to a man whose father was killed in front of his eyes, and the body was left for 6 days in the family compound before he was able to take it to bury his father, and the shock of it killed his mother. And that compound is still not rebuilt. So the scale of it is to be believed. Now, I won't go on too long about this, but what I want to say is that on going back, of course, then to Addis, I had some very constructive meetings, again, with the Prime Minister, the Deputy, and the Minister of Peace, the three key ministers in charge of this operation, along with the Commissioner. And I described this, and they all spoke constructively and solidly to me about their efforts to make this work, even in a time of war. But Ethiopia is going through a very high degree of rhetoric. Humanitarian officials and aid workers are being condemned in public and in social media. I think I've spoken on the record about this, and I spoke to those leaders that I mentioned, that any such criticisms need to stop. First of all, it threatens the lives of people who are there to help. And secondly, of course, it has an impact on the humanitarian delivery, and it is unacceptable. I think the USAID administrator made the same references in her visit in the last few days. And I was given assurances, again, we'll see, but I was given assurances by those ministers that this will not continue. And I said, look, if there are specific individuals that you have evidence about not pursuing a firm, neutral stance in the humanitarian delivery, tell us. Of course we'll investigate. We've all heard of the suspension of 2 or 3 NGOs, and I just want to tell you that we're in discussion. I've been in discussion in Addis and since, and even this morning, with the Minister of Peace about those suspensions to try to get our way through that. I want to end this short point with 2 points. One, Ethiopia is not a stranger to the humanitarian needs. Even at present, up to 10 million, maybe a little more, of the Ethiopian population is in need of humanitarian assistance, and largely getting it because it's all over the country. One of the messages I wanted to make clear was that the United Nations and other agencies are serving the people of Ethiopia and not only the people of Tigray, and have been for a very long time. I had a very constructive in conversation with both the presidents of Amhara region and the president of the Somali region in the last few days to make sure we can serve their people where their displacement happens. About 100,000 extra people have been displaced in Amhara as a result of the war, as a result of the conflict. And that leads to my second point, and my last point, which is this. This war has to stop. This war has to end. We will, all of us, continue to try to make sure that those 100 trucks a day reach Mekelle, reach the beneficiaries. We will do everything we can to help the people affected in Amhara and Afar, while continuing the work in other parts of Ethiopia. But there is no doubt at all that the war has to stop, and a humanitarian ceasefire is a glaring necessity in these circumstances. And this means that offensive military action needs to stop. I expect forces should withdraw, but at the very least, offensive action needs to stop, and a humanitarian ceasefire needs to be brought into being. And I welcomed the Prime Minister's declaration of some weeks ago of a unilateral ceasefire. We need to build on that, make it reciprocal, and give people of Tigray and their neighbors now half a chance of survival in these next months of desperate need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths. And I have already quite a few questions listed, but I'd like to start with the room. Christian Ulrich, our German. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself, Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Christiane, German press agency here. You were talking about the trucks that are stuck. Can you explain a little bit more what the setting there is? Who obstructs the humanitarian aid getting to the recipients? And who are you talking to unblock these? Thank you.
Should I answer directly?
Please,
Okay. Well, the general point I'd make, and I didn't visit those Samara, that part of Afar, so I can't give you a sort of first-hand account of what the scene. But the first point is these are trucks that need to cross the line. Now, you go anywhere in the world, and anywhere in the world where humanitarian assistance is crossing a line of conflict, it's going to be problematic. So, of course, there needs to be screening, there needs to be checking of all those trucks, and there are a number of checkpoints later on that they need to get through to make sure that they're not taking things which are not humanitarian. So I think that's the first issue that we need to address, and I don't think we should have any illusions about how difficult that is for the government of Ethiopia, for the humanitarian agencies. By the way, it's a difficult proposition. Then, of course, we're doing something about this. There are local people in those areas who see those trucks going by and say, we have needs, and why aren't we being served? And so we're ramping up. The World Food Programme in the lead really is ramping up efforts to serve those people. And I know because in many of my discussions with Addis, the senior minister said to me, you need to serve those people and to demonstrate that you're serving Ethiopians and not simply one particular party or one particular set of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Nick Cumming-Bruce.
Yeah, thank you. You say that a real need for all offensive action to stop. The ceasefire is only unilateral so far. Did you meet Tigrayan military commanders? I mean, they were on the BBC a few days ago saying that offensive action has to continue. And so what's your understanding about their approach at this point and their cooperation with your effort?
Well, we have no official contact with Tigrayan military commanders, nor indeed their political leaders. We are, like you would imagine, Nick, as a humanitarian aid effort, in touch with local administrators, people running hospitals and so forth, because we need to work with them to get this, to get our aid to the best place and the highest priority. But we're not in the business of mediating between these two sides. So I, like you, have seen what has been said. We talk to many people who have those contacts so that we at least understand the context. And I would say this in sort of indirect answer to your question. As I say, the Prime Minister has this unilateral ceasefire. He repeated his commitment to it twice on the 2 occasions we met. And I have no reason to doubt that at all. For the Tigrayans, who are extending the war into the south and east, into Afar and Amhara, they need to take into account that without that ceasefire, we will try to get those 100 trucks in, and we'll do everything we can. But it's going to be easier for the Tigrayan people if the war will stop. So they also have an incentive to end their military activities. But I'm a humanitarian coordinator now, not a mediator. So I will keep my hands clean of such matters. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
Jamie?
Mr. Griffiths, thank you. Jamie, Associated Press. I wanted to just follow up on that a little bit. I mean, what would I know you don't want to mediate, but at the same time, humanitarian requires a certain amount of coordination. I mean, and so, what more could you be doing in terms of getting in touch with the military commanders and in particular, what is your message to them about Amhara and Afar regions? I mean, the recent incursions there. What would you say to them directly?
Can I? We're among friends, and it's all off the record, isn't it? Of course, none of this is going to be reported. It's very, very important. Lucky me. Now it's off.
Yeah.
Now it's on?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. In a situation like this, Jamie, you know this, for humanitarian agencies who act between the two sides, it is of the highest importance that they don't get involved in any political activities or the kind that you're describing, which would lead the other side to say that you're siding with one or the other. We're already accused of that, which I referred to earlier. We're already accused of aid workers, feeding the Tigrayan machine. I was on a UN flight to Mekelle, and I was searched in great detail on one leg of that flight. And in fact, my earphones were taken away because it was thought they would be somehow helping the Tigrayan struggle. I have to say, by the way, that since then, the government has intervened to reduce considerably those searches, and we're also, and I welcome that, and also to have 2 more UN flights have taken place to Mekelle and back in the last day. So that's good news. But so we're not, as a humanitarians, we aren't going to get in the business of seeing where the military of the other side are willing to go. There are lots of other people who can do that, probably much better than we can. But you asked the question, what do I think? I think it's time to stop the war, and that means not pursue further military ambitions in Amhara. I noted that Samantha Power was quite clear on this, wasn't she? And she said that they should stop, and I think ideally withdraw to Tigray. And that I would say exactly the same thing. That if you want to, if you want to secure the safety and prosperity and survival of the people of Tigray, the best way to do it, even while the UN agencies and others are trying to do their best, is of course to end the conflict. Now the problem is to stop the conflict, is to freeze it or withdraw forces. Now the problem is, as I know very well as you do, that ceasefires don't happen from one day to the next. Now, this is difficult stuff. A unilateral ceasefire is a good first step, but it needs reciprocity. And it's in the environment of a shooting war, as we all know from elsewhere, it's hard to make that happen. What that means for the humanitarians is that while that is obviously the objective, is let's live with the current circumstances and focus on the 100 trucks, because once the supplies arrive at the moment in Tigray, the access for the agencies in Tigray is relatively good. The frustration of agency, and I of course spent 2 days with them, national NGOs, international NGOs, and UN agencies, is that they have access, but they haven't had the supplies needed to actually exploit the access. So hopefully a little bit better today because of those 178 trucks, but a lot still to be done in an environment in Ethiopia, which is very, very, very fragile, I think I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths. I have Robin Millard from AFP. Robin. It's on the platform, yes, you have to.
Thank you. If all the problems in getting trucks over the line, if they all melted away very quickly, are you ready to go? Do you have those 100 trucks a day ready to roll? And do you have the necessary aid to fill them? Thank you.
That's a really good question, Robin. Thanks very much. And one which we spent quite a lot of time discussing. In other words, the question is, if the gate opens, will you be able to do the job you're supposed to do? And it's a very good question. And I would answer it this way. The quick answer is yes. We are ready to do it. The World Food Programme, which leads the humanitarian efforts on logistics, has the trucks and the supplies ready, and assure me that the pipeline can keep flowing if it's allowed to. There were questions in the past, I think, and discussions about whether the humanitarian agencies had ramped up or scaled up the level of their presence and experienced in people in Tigray. And it was a big ask, but because to suddenly produce that operation out of nowhere and to get the right people in the right place meant that every single agency had to find those people who are scarce by their very nature and deploy them and get them to understand the situation and then get them to work together. And it took a bit of time, as you know. So we looked at that, and this is one of the purposes of my visit. And I can say that largely, Robin, the agencies are ready. They have experienced people in Mekelle. For example, just one example out of many, the head of the UNHCR operation in Tigray is their head of emergencies from Geneva. Like OCHA, we have also 120 staff around Ethiopia, a lot of them dealing with Tigray. We have also sent in people from the rest of our offices to help, very experienced people. So I think Tigray has the benefit of, on the whole, of experienced people who've seen something like this before. And I think, you know, I've had that experience myself, and I know enough to know that having seen something like this before is incredibly important when you're making judgments. It's also vitally important if you are to maintain, in very difficult circumstances, your careful, cool neutrality and impartiality. When you're seeing such terrible things in front of you, experience is the difference. It makes the difference, I think. And experienced leadership, in particular, is what agencies need and mostly have to make sure that our people do the right thing despite the stresses and frustrations that they have daily. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths. Peter Kenny, for which outlet today?
Yeah, hi. I'm asking my question for Anadolu Agency, Mr. Griffiths. I'm just trying to get the picture clear here. The UN does not have road access, which is being blocked by the Tigrayan forces, but how are you getting into Mekelle? Who is letting you into Mekelle? Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, for the question. I think you misunderstood what I've been saying. Inside Tigray, because of the declaration by the Prime Minister some weeks ago of that unilateral ceasefire and the withdrawal of his forces, you will remember that what he did was he declared a unilateral ceasefire and he declared a withdrawal of Ethiopian National Defense Forces in order for humanitarian reasons, and in order, in particular, for example, he referenced the need for the planting of the harvest. So there is no, at the moment, and God knows, I hope it continues, conflict in large areas of southern, central, and eastern Tigray. Not all of Tigray, but those areas. So there is no impediment to agencies moving in those areas at the moment. The difficulty arises coming through from government-held areas. Afar is the proximate region, and our supplies crossing the line then into those Tigray areas not under current government control. That's the area where it requires daily detailed negotiation to make sure that these these supplies come through. And we also need a backup air service so that staff, for example, can rotate. The need for cash is very, very high indeed. But the banking system doesn't exist in Tigray. The same for telecommunications. We lack communications equipment, cash, communications equipment, basic services, if you like, are vitally important to get the humanitarian operation going. So, for example, as you probably know, to run convoys, you need communications equipment to manage convoys, and if you don't have it, you can't do it. So, the World Food Programme does have, and have just repaired their VSAT equipment, but many of the agencies don't have it. And it's important for safety and security of our staff. Without 24/7 comms, some of our staff, agency staff, particularly in the north of Tigray and Shire, could come under attack, and we'd be at a loss, at a disadvantage, excuse me, as to how to get them out safely. So comms equipment is not, it is for the functioning of the operation. Cash is essential to pay workers, to buy fuel, to pay humanitarian workers, to pay local services. And so the government has a provision to allow a certain amount of money to be taken in after procedures are satisfied, taken in physically in cash into Mekelle. And this tends to happen, of course, on the flights. But it's cumbersome for the government, it's cumbersome for us. So one of the things I was told by many is that even if you took a first step to switch on the cash, to switch on the banking system, not only would the agencies be better equipped, but many people I spoke to who'd put their savings, Tigrayans, right, members of the community and communities, left alone, who can't get access to the savings they have in their accounts because they can't get access to their accounts. It's very, very important that this happens. It's very important for dignity and respect, as well as for survival. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths. A last question from Ian Everman. Ian, for which media outlet, please?
Yes, good afternoon. I write for several German language media. I was wondering, did you ask the Prime Minister to get full access for the aid convoys, full and unhindered access for the aid convoys? And if so, what was his response?
That's a slightly invasive question in terms of my conversations with the Prime Minister. But of course I asked him that. I mean, it was one of the first things we talked about was access, because it's the presented problem for us. And the Prime Minister, as you know, is very much the leader of the government of Ethiopia, very much the inspiration, I think, of that government, the leader who has just gone through a successful election for his Prosperity Party. He is the person you need to talk to if you want things of this magnitude and of this sensitivity done. And certainly on one occasion, without going into details, in our discussions about this issue, in which of course he said yes, he is absolutely committed to making this work. Because I was saying to him, I think this is very difficult to make it work, and he said, it will happen, we will make it work. And indeed, he traveled out of town during my visit, apparently, to intervene to secure routes. Now, I'm not privy to what happens to after I've left the room and comments have been made, but I've learnt from many, many years of diplomacy and mediation is that what you do is you take people at their word. And I was very pleased with what I heard on that count. We've seen some improvement in the last days. The challenge is going to be making it reliable, because a humanitarian program depends, its beneficiaries depend on when the next one is going to come. When is the next food delivery going to happen? When is the next delivery of medicines going to happen? They need to know a sense of throughput and purpose. It's not a one-off. You give them food today and you say, I don't know when we'll be back. It's like for all of us, it's impossible to deal with that. So reliability, dependability of that land route through into Tigray is the highest priority for us. And I know that my colleague Ramiro is working on it day and night now in Addis, and I'm hoping that we will continue to see the improvement that we've all been told will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And this concludes our press conference right on time. I would like to thank USG Griffiths very, very much for this briefing and wish him all the best for the enormous task in front of him and the humanitarian community in Ethiopia. Thank you very much for all of you for being here with us today. Bon appétit.
Thanks a lot.